Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again. This is a new show on a film classic. Not only is it, I think, one of the greatest films ever made. I think it's one of the greatest westerns ever made. So very excited about this movie to talk about it. I did a review of this film probably a couple of years ago. It was like 2 years ago. It was before I did any live video at all. When I first started doing video oriented kind of things, it was on Facebook. Of course, I was doing like, video reviews, and then I started to do a few interview segments. And it, did that for a while, and then it kind of evolved to where I'm at now, where I'm doing a YouTube channel. And I still run all those other pages, Film Fanatic, or the Facebook page, and then also the newest one, which has been around for um, probably a year now or so, my Instagram page. So I did a review of this film back then, and it was, again, before I did any video content. So I'm very excited about talking about this movie in the video format. I just recently bought it. I got a really beautiful edition. So, yeah, very excited. And so it is Tuesday, like I said again, and it's about 10:30. Pretty crappy day, pretty rainy, overcast, kind of a cold day. So it is what it is. But again, it's a good day to watch movies. As far as like climate or like weather wise, I mean, I watch movies all the time anyway, but I love watching movies when it's snowing out. There's something comforting about that, and especially if you get hit by a storm, a snowstorm, of where it's like uh, dangerous to venture out to drive. The roads are bad, or it's just whiteout conditions. And I love to watch a movie in that environment. That's my favorite kind of place. I have such a great memory of that around one of my favorite movies of all time, my favorite horror movie of all time, and my favorite film from my favorite director, Stanley Kubrick, and that movie is The Shining. And I remember I've lived here in this little house for quite a few years, and I remember when I first moved into this house, I had the basic bare essentials for furniture. I had like a little couch. I was still like moving in. Everything was still boxed in boxes, but I had just kind of moved in. My girlfriend at the time also was helping out with that, and we were staying here. Our intention was to stay here, and it was during the winter time, and I think it was my first winter here in the house. And I had like just bare essentials. I had like a little couch. I had a couple of chairs. I didn't have very much furniture, and it was just the bare. I had a bed, and I had the bare essentials. I had a little TV, pretty decent sized TV, and I had a little portable DVD player that was hooked up to it, and that was it. I didn't have like a sound system. I didn't even have internet here. I mean, this was a long time ago. Didn't even have a stereo in here. So, and I remember the first night that we stayed here, it was during this massive snowstorm, and we basically got snowed in here for like 2 days. And I remember during that blizzard, we watched The Shining, and it was so fucking awesome because it was like, not only does that movie take place, that's what it's about. It's essentially about isolation, and it takes place at the Overlook Hotel, and where there's like this massive blizzard. So it was like kind of like probably the best film experience I ever had around that, and probably the best movie experience watching at, or where I watched a movie at home. It was just so awesome because I it was even more immersive. And considering we had this little rickety TV and a, crappy little DVD player, and it was right around the time. By that time, I started buying a lot of DVDs, and I had pretty decent little collection of movies. I had maybe like 30 movies at the time, and they were all DVDs. And I used to watch them all the time, and that was what we watched, and it was such a great memory. It was so fun. So today's show is on an American movie classic, John Wayne's The Searchers. I'm a huge fan of Western movies. I've done a handful of Western uh, videos on really great Westerns that I love. I don't feel like I have enough in that department. I want to do more Westerns because I really do love Westerns a lot. It's actually one of my favorite genres. And I have I don't know, a pretty decent collection. You know, I just did one on High Plains Drifter, directed by Clint Eastwood, and I had not seen that movie. I don't think I had ever seen that movie before, which is kind of messed up. That was one of the movies that I bought in this collection. This is also another movie that I bought in the big sale at Opera House Video. High Plains Drifter. I had not. I probably did see that. Now that I think of it, I mean, growing up as a kid, my dad was always a big Western fan. So we used to watch lots of Westerns. My mom was always into Hitchcock, and then my dad was always into like Westerns, and as you know, Clint Eastwood, John Wayne. So action movies, but stuff in that period. So a lot of John Ford movies, who also directed this movie. Um, and I did a review on High Plains Drifter recently, and I also did a review way back when on The Unforgiven, which is probably my favorite Western of all time. But there's so many great films in that genre, and The Searchers is right up there. This is a such a classic film. It is. I don't know. I think it's probably the best film that John Wayne's ever done. It might be the you know John Wayne is just so iconic in this movie. It's pretty easy to say. I kind of think it's probably his best movie out of his career. And of course, the iconic director John Ford. One of the greatest. He was an American treasure, I think, as far as like a filmmaker, and like his legacy as a filmmaker, his influence on American cinema and just world cinema is like kind of astounding. Um, I mean, the movies under his to his credit are just pretty staggering. Of course, The Searchers. This came out in 1956. Stagecoach, 1939. The Quiet Man, 1952. The Man Who Shot Liberty in 62. The Grapes of Wrath, 1940. Fort Apache, 1948. She Wore a Yellow Ribbon in 1949. I mean, just, classic after classic. One of the most influential directors. And I'm going to talk about on how I discovered this movie. Because I think I probably did see this growing up. I know I must have. Because this movie was on cable a lot. It was on a lot of the movie channels. It's a movie that's still it's in constant rotation on a lot of the, your classic cable television shows like TMC and Turner Music Movie Classics. I think that's probably where I saw it. It was a movie that was always acclaimed, rightfully so. And again, this body of work is just, staggering. My Darling Clementine in 1946. Rio Grande, 1950. The Horse Soldiers in 1959. How Green Valley Was My Valley in 1941. I mean, so many films to John Ford's credit, and also so many. It's probably easy to say or safe to say most of the films that he directed were westerns. And John Wayne also, I would say it's pretty safe to say he's mostly well known as in his career as being in mostly western films. Um, but again, I look at John Ford and John Wayne as kind of being, you know, they really were pivotal in shaping the scope of the American cinema. I truly think that especially John Ford, if like he didn't if his if he didn't exist as a director and as an artist, I really think American cinema would be incredibly different. It would be a different place. And getting back to John Wayne, Rio Brava, 1959, which I believe is. I also bought that, which I'm really excited. I've seen that a few times. That's an amazing film. Rio Brava, too, I believe, is the movie that Quentin Tarantino has talked a lot about throughout the years, of saying that it's his favorite film of all time. He also was in the original True Grit in 1969, and of course, The Searchers, 56. El Dorado in 1966, The Quiet Man. He worked a lot with John Ford. The Quiet Man in 52, The Shootist in 76, Stagecoach in 75, 39. Again, just so prolific. Such an icon, and just such a part of the American experience, and such a part of the fabric of cinema. The Horse Soldiers in 59, Red River 48, The Cowboys in 72. I mean, the list the list is endless. He basically, he had a long partnership with John Ford, and they directed so many films together. The way I discovered The Searchers, and again, I believe it's pretty much, I'm pretty sure it's true, but again, this movie was so long ago, but I do believe I did see this film when I was a real little kid. Again, I grew up uh, in a family, especially my mom, who was always really into horror films, really into films. My parents always watched a lot of movies. That's how I got into movies. And my mom was, and she still is, always very much into horror films, and really, really into the movies of Alfred Hitchcock. And my dad was really into westerns, a lot of John Ford movies. Um, he wasn't really into. It's funny because I really love spaghetti westerns. I love Sergio Leone. I love all of the Italian westerns that came out in the 60s and 70s, and also I've been getting more into searching out and checking out all the spaghetti westerns, but then all of the Italian exploitation westerns that were coming out, and discovering these other directors that were doing a lot of these things. It was a massive scene. My dad was never into the Italian films. He didn't like the quality of them. He always thought the quality of a lot of the Italian films were not very wasn't very good. Wasn't on par with like a John Ford movie, and I always thought that was kind of funny. So I didn't really get to see any of the spaghetti westerns until years and years later. And I when it comes to the western genre, I mean, how can you not love John Ford? But I kind of like the more I kind of I'm probably more into the spaghetti western, the more western exploitation take on the Italian take on the American western. I'm more into that style than say the traditional American western, even though these movies are just amazing and incredible. Without the spaghetti, without these films, the spaghetti western would not exist, and they would have been nothing for the Italians to kind of exploit. So westerns also were such a part of the American fabric, especially in terms of like box office. These films were, highly popular, commercially successful. The films of John Ford were very successful. They were, looked at and regarded as these epic films, and they were widely embraced by many, many people from different walks of life, and rightfully so. But the way I kind of rediscovered The Searchers was through by watching an interview with Martin Scorsese, and of course, one of my all-time favorite directors of all time. And also, I just recently did a show on the Killers of the Flower Moon, and I recently just, an amazing, amazing movie. And I recently just watched an interview with Scorsese around the Killers of the Flower Moon, and he always brings up every time I've seen interviews with him some degree, and of course anybody who knows Scorsese, not only is he one of the greatest filmmakers alive, speaking of American treasures, but still just doing amazing work. But he is such a living, breathing encyclopedia when it comes to films. Like it's astounding how much knowledge he possesses as a person. But in almost every interview I've seen with Scorsese, he always talks about John Ford to some capacity. And over the years, like I've watched a lot of interviews with him because he's one of my favorite directors. So I'm always interested in listening to him talk. He's one of those guys I can just listen to talk for hours and just it's like a film class, a free film class, or a free lesson about film history. It's amazing, and he's just talking off the cuff. He just has all of this knowledge, where it's just such a part of his brain. But in a few interviews, one interview in particular, a couple of years ago, he was talking about pretty much he was talking about the body of work of John Ford, and he was talking about The Searchers and how The Searchers was one of his it's probably his favorite western, I think, more or less, and he felt it was like his greatest role the greatest role for John Wayne, and he also thought the level of well, he kind of regards John Wayne's as being one of the most like callous and kind of one of the most almost vile characters on the screen, but yet he has all of these qualities of where you have empathy towards him, but he's such a vile and kind of hostile person and kind of a hateful person, and he just oozes with this kind of angry and hateful attitude towards everything and everyone, and he's just there. There's certain scenes in The Searchers of where John Wayne's character is interacting with a few other characters, and it's he kind of makes your skin crawl. And but this movie, The Searchers, and he was talking about so Scorsese's talked about this film a lot, and so I remember it was a year or two ago I rented it at Opera House Video. It was actually probably this copy because I bought this at Opera House at their sale, and this is the copy. It's a really beautiful edition too. There's a really cool like little introduction by John Wayne's son on here, so it's really pretty fantastic. And I after seeing this interview with Scorsese, went out and I rented it, and I was like, wow, like this movie is really really great. John Wayne's character is really kind of one of the most vile characters I've ever seen. And Scorsese said that he's like modeled that character, and trying to also make him an incredibly charismatic, but then also very complex, but overall a very vile character. He's modeled that kind of character in a lot of his films, with certain like villains or certain archetypes in some of his films, like Goodfellas or a lot of the mafia films that he's done. And he talked about how that this film has just had such an influence on him. And I have to say this movie is breathtaking. I mean, the cinema it's got some of the most incredible cinematography I've ever seen. Like it's jaw-dropping. And the story is really cool. It's basically about John Wayne plays this character who comes back. He's a Civil War veteran, and he comes back to see his family and to some friends, and then over time there is this confrontation with these Comanche Indians, and they basically are this party is a war party, and they basically kidnap the daughter Lucy and kill and burn out their house, and they're kind of they rampage over through this family, and John Wayne basically puts together this brigade of men to go track and find Lucy and to seek revenge on the for the family. And it's a really great film. I mean, it's really it's such an epic, and again, the cinematography for this film is just like breathtaking. and like just the opening sequence alone, it's truly jaw dropping. The direction is amazing, great characters. They all have these really interesting arcs. Great action. It really delivers on that level. It's a pretty complex story. Again, it's mostly centered on John Wayne because you really like him, or at least I get this feeling like I really like him and really care about his character, and I feel that way with all of the characters on the screen. But at the same time, I just like am kind of disgusted by him and just like wow, like just he's such a vile person and so uh, just cancerous and just mean and but yet you have this interesting kind of dynamic with him. And I think he's kind of one of like the role that he plays, that John Wayne plays is this iconic character is just just such a an amazing character because he's complex and yet he's vile and he does all these kind of terrible things and says all these terrible things, but then you kind of have empathy towards him. I mean, and it's just amazing writing that you feel, as a viewer and as a film watcher, you're being pulled in all these different directions, and I just think that's you know because of the brilliant direction by the master John Ford and just the incredible writing. And again, this transfer of this film on DVD is really spectacular. There's a bunch of special features on here, and this was I watched this again last night, and this was like my second time watching this film, and I just love this movie. It's such a classic. It's definitely, I think out of the John Ford movies I've seen, this is probably my favorite one, and I think it's uh, out of the John Wayne movies, I think it's probably my favorite John Wayne movie, and it's hard to say because there's so many great films that both of these figures were involved in, and also where they collaborated on all of these great classics. But this is, I think, this movie is just a masterwork, and just like a primetime example of a film classic. Like I think legitimately, like if you're a fan of film and movies and having that cinematic experience and kind of what makes a movie so damn good, this is like one of the holy books. Like this is I think this is an essential movie for anyone to own and to watch numerous times if they want to learn about film or just or if they have a deep appreciation for film. This movie is just incredible. So this is Jason Dean. Definitely check this film out. It's a classic, um, timeless classic, and I think, like I said, it's essential cinema, essential. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.